The rain hammered the church roof like God's own judgment. But inside, the real storm was brewing in my chest as I watched my father's casket lower into the muddy grave. "Evan, you were always the disappointment." He'd spat at me 9 years ago, his voice slicing through the Thanksgiving turkey like a carving knife. Now, as the family shovel turned in my sister's trembling hand, she locked eyes with me and whispered, "We need you, Ev, more than ever." I was 16 when it all shattered, back in that stuffy dining room in suburban Cleveland, Ohio, where the scent of overcooked green beans clung to the air like regret. I'd flunked out of junior year. Too many skipped classes. Too many nights lost in the glow of my laptop screen, chasing whispers of who I really was. But it wasn't just the grades. It was the letter I'd slipped under my parents' bedroom door the night before, the one that started with "I'm gay" and ended with "I hope you still love me." My father, red-faced and vein-popping, had read it aloud at the table, his voice booming like a judge's gavel. This is why you're failing. Because you're unnatural." My mother had burst into tears, not for me, but for the shame it would bring on the family name. My sister, Mia, just 14 and wide-eyed, had stared at her plate, fork frozen midway to her mouth. "You're throwing it all away, Evan," Dad had roared, slamming his fist so hard the water glasses jumped. "Get out. Fix yourself or don't come back." I didn't fix myself. I ran, packed a duffel with jeans, a hoodie, and every dollar from my part-time gig at the corner gas station, $2.37, and hitchhiked east toward the promise of New York City, the only place I'd ever seen on TV that looked like it swallowed broken kids whole and spat them out whole again. The Greyhound bus from Pittsburgh was my first real taste of freedom, but it came with motion sickness and a gnawing hunger that no vending machine chips could fill. I crashed on couches in Brooklyn hostels, lied about my age to bus tables at a dive bar in Williamsburg, and learned quick that survival meant smiling through the grease burns and ignoring the catcalls from drunk frat boys who thought pretty boy was a compliment. That's where I met Owen. It was a Tuesday in late spring, the kind where the air smelled like hot pretzels and exhaust, and I was wiping down sticky counters at the Rusty Anchor when he walked in, tall, with shoulders that filled out his faded Yankees tee like he owned the joint, and eyes the color of worn leather, soft but steady. He ordered a Bud Light and a basket of wings, then tipped me $20 on a $12 tab. "Rough night?" he'd asked, nodding at the fresh cut on my knuckle from a shattered pint glass. I shrugged, muttering something about clumsy customers, but he lingered, sketching doodles on a napkin, abstract swirls that looked like storm clouds breaking. Turned out he was a graphic designer, freelancing for indie bands, crashing with roommates in Bushwick. "Name's Owen," he said, extending a hand that swallowed mine whole. "You look like you could use a real meal sometime." Our first real talk happened on the fire escape of his walk-up, sharing a stolen six-pack as the city hummed below us. I spilled it all, the letter, the dinner, the bus ride that felt like fleeing a crime scene. Owen didn't flinch. He just listened, his knee brushing mine in the narrow space, and when I trailed off, voice cracking, he said, "Sounds like they failed you. Not the other way around." It was the first time anyone had framed it that way. Not pity, not judgment. Just truth, wrapped in that quiet Midwestern drawl he'd picked up from summers in Indiana. By July, we were inseparable. Late-night walks along the East River, where he'd trace constellations on my palm with his fingertip. Lazy Sundays in his tiny studio, me reading Kerouac aloud while he inked album covers. Owen was the anchor I didn't know I needed, fiercely loyal, with a laugh that rumbled like thunder and a way of holding me that made the world feel less like a battlefield. But love in the city is a fragile thing, built on ramen noodles and borrowed Wi-Fi. I clawed my way up, enrolling in community college on a GED and financial aid, majoring in business because it promised stability, the kind my father had always preached about from his mid-level accounting desk at the steel mill. Nights, I'd study under the harsh buzz of Owen's desk lamp, his hand absently rubbing my shoulders as he worked. "You're gonna crush this, Ev," he'd murmur, and damn if it didn't make me believe it. By 22, I had my associates, an internship at a boutique consulting firm in Midtown, and Owen by my side, our first real apartment in Astoria, a shoebox with a leaky faucet but a view of the bridge that made it feel like a castle. Success crept in slow, like fog off the Hudson. I landed at Hargrove Advisors, a firm that catered to blue-collar families hitting the jackpot, lottery winners, inheritance windfalls, folks like my parents who suddenly had more money than sense. I specialized in legacy planning, turning windfalls into safety nets, and word spread. Clients trusted me because I listened, because I knew what it felt like to start with nothing. Owen was there for the milestones. The promotion to junior partner, the bottle of cheap champagne we popped on our balcony at midnight. To us, he'd toast, pulling me close, his breath warm against my neck. We talked marriage sometimes, in whispers after lovemaking, nothing flashy, just a quiet ceremony in Central Park. Rings from a pawn shop that meant more than gold. He was my future, the one person who'd never made me feel like a failure. Then the call came 3 years ago, on a gray October afternoon. Mia's voice on the line, hesitant and small. "Dad's sick, Ev. Cancer. Stage 4. He asks about you sometimes." I froze in the glass-walled conference room, staring at the skyline that suddenly looked too sharp, too indifferent. Owen found me there after, curled in the lobby chair, and drove me to a diner where the coffee was burnt but the silence was safe. "You don't owe them shit," he said, but his eyes held the question I couldn't answer. What if I want to? Reconciliation isn't a straight line. It's a goddamn maze with dead ends named guilt and pride. I flew back to Cleveland alone, Owen kissing me goodbye at LaGuardia with a fierceness that said, "Come back to me." The house on Elm Street hadn't changed. Same faded siding, same creaky porch swing, but my parents had. Dad was a shadow in his recliner, chemo-ravaged and wheezing, Mom hovering like a ghost. Mia hugged me so tight I felt her ribs, whispering apologies for the silence we'd all kept. "Over weak tea," Dad rasped. "I was wrong, son, about everything." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it cracked something open in me. A sliver of light through the boarded-up window of our history. We rebuilt in fits and starts. Holiday cards turned to calls, calls to visits. I advised them on finances when Dad's pension faltered, helped Mia navigate her divorce settlement with the steady hand I'd honed in boardrooms. Owen came once, tense at first, but charmed Mom with his sketches and Dad with stories of his own fractured family. A brother lost to addiction, a mother who'd walked out. "Family's what you make it," Owen said over pie, and for the first time, Dad nodded instead of arguing. The betrayal hit like a freight train, derailing everything I'd pieced together. It was last spring, 6 months after Dad's remission announcement. Miraculous, the doctors called it. I'd flown home for Mia's birthday, Owen staying behind for a deadline crunch. The party was at the VFW hall, balloons sagging in the humid air, relatives I'd half forgotten clapping me on the back like I was the prodigal son returned. Dad pulled me aside midway through, his grip surprisingly strong, eyes gleaming with something I mistook for pride. "Evan, there's something I need to tell you. About the money." Turns out, the inheritance windfall that had funded Dad's treatments wasn't some distant uncle's estate. It was mine. Proceeds from a patent I'd filed in college. A simple app for budgeting windfalls that Hargrove had licensed quietly, funneling the royalties into a trust my father had managed without a word. 20 grand a year, compounding, now over 200,000. "I was protecting you," he said, voice low. "From yourself. From distractions." Distractions. He meant Owen, meant the life I'd built brick by queer brick. He'd used my own success to bail out his mistakes, the gambling debts from his steel mill poker nights, the loan shark circling when the cancer bills piled up. And Mia? She'd known for a year, signing the papers in secret, too scared of losing him to speak up. I confronted her in the parking lot, rain starting to spit from the overcast sky, my voice raw as the gravel under my boots. "How could you? After everything," she sobbed, clutching my sleeve. "He was dying, Ev. We needed it. You're doing so well. You didn't miss it." Betrayal burned hotter than anger. A knife twist from the people I'd forgiven, the family I'd let back in. I drove to the airport in a daze, wheels hydroplaning on the interstate, Owen's unanswered texts lighting up my phone like accusations. By the time I landed in JFK, The rage had curdled into something colder. Resolve. Owen was waiting at the gate, face etched with worry, arms open before I could speak. I collapsed into him, the story spilling out in fragments between choking sobs. He held me through the night, no words, just the steady rhythm of his breathing against mine. In the morning, over diner eggs in Astoria, he said, "We take it back. All of it. You're the advisor now, for real." He was right. I sued not for vengeance, but for boundaries. The settlement stripped the trust, returned every cent. But more than that, it forced the truth into the open. Dad's letters came weekly after, scrawled apologies that trembled on the page. "I feared losing you to a world that didn't understand. But I lost you to my own fear." The climax came on that rooftop 6 months later, the one overlooking the glittering chaos of Manhattan, where Owen and I had first dreamed of forever. I'd invited them up, Mom, Dad, Mia, under the guise of a family summit. But really, it was reckoning time. The elevator dinged. And there they stood, drenched from the downpour we'd ignored, faces pale against the storm. Dad leaned on his cane, older than his years, Mom twisting her purse strap like a lifeline. Mia hung back, eyes red-rimmed. I didn't yell. I just laid it out. The pain of 16, the theft of 28, the love I'd built despite them. Owen stood beside me, hand firm on my shoulder, a silent vow. Dad's voice broke first. "You were right to fight back. We failed you. But you've become the man I could never be. Strong, honest." Mom wept openly, reaching for my hand. "Forgive us, Evan. Not for us. For you." Mia stepped forward last, voice steady. "You're our advisor now. In everything. No more secrets." The rain eased as the sun dipped, painting the skyline in bruised purples and golds. I didn't say yes right away. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a choice, repeated like breaths. But in that moment, with Owen's warmth grounding me and the city sprawling endless below, I felt the weight lift. Not gone, but shared. We descended together, the elevator humming like a heartbeat, and over takeout in our apartment later, Dad even asked Owen about his latest project, a real conversation blooming amid the steam of lo mein. It's been a year now. Dad's cancer is in full retreat. Mom's taken up painting classes, bad ones but joyful, and Mia calls me weekly, not for advice but just to talk. Owen and I, we're planning that Central Park wedding. Rings picked from the same Astoria jeweler. Simple bands etched with unfailing. I've risen at Hargrove, heading the family legacy division, turning strangers' failures into futures. And my own family? They've learned to trust the advisor they once discarded. The son who failed at 16 but succeeded at loving himself. In the end, it's not about who we were, but who we choose to become. And damn if that doesn't feel like the American dream, queer and complicated as it is.